Is it me? Is it time for me? Really? Really? Put me in, coach. I'm ready to play. All right. Good morning, class. My name is Jeff Hornung. I'm a wood turner here in St. Louis. I come to meetings pretty much when you guys have me come out to demonstrate, simply because I'm a full-time wood turner and teacher. And for some strange and unknown reason, you guys refuse to consult with my scheduling people as far as dates and times. And I'm normally on the road or in the middle of something. And that's why I don't show up at meetings very often. I'm honored to be here again as your demonstrator, and we're going to go over the process of Shou. And since Tom has limited me to an hour, we're going to move quickly. I will try to get, stop laughing, Steve. I'll try to get my stuff done in my allotted time, but no promises or guarantees. So just the way it is. Real quick, I own the Walnut Log, thewalnutlog.com. This is a wood turning, woodworking supply retailer. I'm online, or you're welcome to come up to my shop in Florissant for a shop visit. And if you want to go home with product, I will be happy to trade you product for money, which is awesome. I did bring some stuff if you need it. I've got Yorkshire Grit, Hampshire Sheen Gloss, Hampshire Sheen Microcrystalline Wax, and all of the Unicorn Spit product that I currently have in stock. And I brought that simply because that's what we're using to do the coloring on our Shou pieces. So if you need stuff after the words, I've got it up here. I've also recently become an Easy Wood Tools dealer, and I do have inventory on the brand new beading cutters. Now I got to sell Steve his first. The rest that I have here are available, and if I run out and you want something, it'll just be a matter of a couple of days. I'll be bringing in more inventory, and we'll get them to you one way or another. So if you need stuff, let me know, or at the very least, the next time you need supplies, check out thewalnutlog.com and see if there's any way that I can help you. All St. Louis Wood Turning Club members get a lifetime 10% discount. It's easier for you to just call me up and place your order over the phone, or shoot me an email like Murray did. Walk up in person, say, hey, I need stuff, and I'll be more than happy to work with you. So check out the website. Yeah, that's it as far as housekeeping. So let's get right into the project. What we're going to do today is a technique called Shou. Now the problem is the phrase Shou doesn't actually mean anything. It's a misnomer. Brief history: the technique that we're replicating is actually originally called yakisuga, and that is specifically literally translated to heating Japanese cypress with fire. Yakisuga is the name of the technique. That's the official technique. And because Japan was closed to all trade, European, American, or otherwise, for a little over 200 years, starting in the mid 1600s, opening up in 1853, there was a huge cultural void coming from the island of Japan. And then in 1853, there was a huge surge of cultural exchange happening. Because of this instant huge surge, there's a lot of things that got lost quite literally in translation. So best that the Japanese can figure is the phrase Shoshugiban was a botched translation of the characters that the Japanese used to write yakisuga. Okay, so if you go to Japan and you're trying to talk to somebody about Shoshugiban, they're just going to look at you funny because it doesn't actually mean anything. What we have decided, or what we have done now, is kind of use that to define the decorative form of this heat treating of wood process. And it's really a fascinating process for construction, for wood preservation, but it becomes a really fun process for decorative elements. And a lot of people have started applying this to wood turning, and we will talk about some science because that's kind of important. But if you can go to the overhead real quick. There it is. All right, so this is not what I'm going to be demonstrating, but this is a piece that I'm working on for some upcoming shows. Just a sunset over the water And it's simply a piece of maple plate that I have scorched to a particular temperature, brushed back the char, did some color work with a very translucent color that blends nice with water, did a little accenting with some black and white, depending on where it needed to be, and started the process of painting the rim. The back will end up fully painted as well, mostly because I can't help myself. That's just kind of the way it is. But there's an enormous amount of cool decorative stuff that you can do utilizing setting pieces on fire, cleaning them up, and adding some color. It's not difficult. It's a little technical, and you got to hit some temperatures, but there's an easy way to know when you do that. So that's you can come up and take a look at that if you want. That's a pretty cool piece. These are some other things that I've done. That's just a piece of pine. This is the first one that I did when I was teaching myself the technique, and it was a lot of fun. The pine had a big knot right there, and it made for a really nice focal point. So I keep this one hung up in my own shop just because I happen to like it. And this is something that I've been teaching both in person and online. This is the Hearts on Fire, and it's become the my newest collection piece. I do this in a number of colors and sizes and whatnot, and the general public seems to really appreciate it. It's just heart-shaped woods, heart shapes cut out of wood and then turned as a thin winged plate. Fun to do, very simple to do, and the process usually starts out with me just taking a particular piece of wood, drawing a heart shape on it, going over to the bandsaw. Now I've got one of my bandsaws set up with an eighth inch blade and the Carter single bearing guide. I don't remember what that device is called, but it's the Carter single bearing that Alex uses for making his little reindeers. It allows me to do really nice scroll saw type work utilizing a stronger machine such as a bandsaw, since we're dealing with 1.5 to 2 inch pieces of wood usually when I'm doing this particular technique. From there, I mount between centers. I turn it down into a plate, and if we have time at the end, maybe I'll actually try to crank one of these out, show you how I turn it. But I want to talk about the process of the scorching and the coloring first, because that's really the most important part. Wood selection. Wood selection is incredibly important because of that science that we were talking about. The way this works is you must heat the surface of the wood hot enough to cause a chemical change in the resins that are in the grain of the wood. Okay, all woods have resin. Some woods have higher percentages. The woods with the higher percentages of resin are best suited for this particular technique. The Japanese back in the early, I don't know, 1200s, 1400s, whenever they figured out the original Yakasugi technique, they made most of their structures out of wood. Honestly, they still make a lot of their structures out of wood, and wood has a terrible habit of catching on fire and burning down, right? So somewhere along the line, somebody figured out after a building or a temple burned down, they would go back and try to salvage some of the timber and use that charred timber in new construction. And they noticed over the years that that charred timber seemed to be a lot more weather resistant, a lot more rot resistant, a lot more bug resistant. And they put one and one together and came up with, oh, hey, if we scorch the surface of this wood, it does something in that increases its longevity, its lifespan. So they started using fire as a wood preservative technique. They had an issue, they solved an issue, and the cool thing is they used fire. It did not hurt the process that also was a really pretty, really attractive technique that you could get some really cool coloring on the wood as well, simply because of the scorching technique. Now, like I said, Yakasugi refers specifically to Japanese cypress, and that has been their primary building lumber. It seemed to be the most abundant, the strongest, the easiest to work with to do the things that they needed to do. And so there was a lot of this Japanese cypress in these buildings, caught fire, figured it out. Hey, this is a good preservative. So that preservative technique for centuries was specifically applied only to cypresses or cedars or certain pines, simply because they had a higher resin content in the grain. Now, they did not know that. They just knew that some woods work better, other woods did not work as well. So we figured out that it's this resin content. Now, for turners, I'm not going to turn pine, no matter how pretty it might be for the technique. I don't like turning pine. If you do, that's your problem. It's not for me. You can have my share of pine and just enjoy yourselves. But because I do a lot of color work, I do prefer working with a nice hard maple. And the great thing about the technique is maple does have just enough resin content in the growth rings to respond positively to this technique. And what we're actually technically trying to do is we're trying to like caramelize the resins in that growth ring. So going with a food reference, which is easy for me, caramelized onions are getting a good caramelized surface on a steak with high heat and a good sear on a steak. What you're doing is you're getting the sugars in that food to a high enough temperature that it changes chemically on a chemical level and becomes a slightly different compound. We need to do that with the resins in the wood. We're effectively caramelizing those resins. I don't know what the actual temperatures are, but there's a visual tell that you can see on the surface of the wood that will allow you to know when you've achieved enough heat. The downside is certain woods don't respond to that particular level of heat, especially if they're on the thin side. They will actually combust, catch on fire, and you won't have a piece to work on. I've experimented with this and researched that particular process thoroughly. Try not to get your pieces that you're planning on setting on fire. Keep them a 1/4 inch thick or thicker. Anything thinner, you will burn holes in your piece. And while it's funny for you to laugh at me, it's kind of annoying in the heat of the moment when you're trying to get something done. So keep your pieces a little bit on the thicker side. So wood selection, maple, good hard maple is a really good candidate for this. White pine, cedar, if you're careful, cedar will burn quickly, but it's got enough resins that if you can control the heat and get it to the temperature fast enough, it'll do that caramelizing thing without combusting, and you should be all right. Ash is pretty good. White oak, whoever wins the white oak, that will respond well to this heat treatment technique. There's enough resin in there. I've not found other woods to be responsive, but once I figured out that I could work with the maple that I prefer to work with anyway, I stopped looking. It's just what I prefer. You can go online and Google woods appropriate for Shou, and there's lists out there give you a little bit more information should you desire it. So wood selection we covered. Fire technique. I find MAP gas to be the best. Now they will not let me burn stuff inside, which is probably good because it's a very smoky process. So I fully recommend that if you're going to do this, you step outside of your shop. My wife isn't here, but she might be watching online. So I'm supposed to say that I'm not allowed to set things on fire in my shop because my wife is concerned that I might burn my house down. That is a legitimate concern. And I am fortunate that I've got a door straight outside and little stepping stones that I can burn stuff on. So good ventilation. If you choose to do it inside, make sure your shop's super clean. And more importantly, take it outside and set it on fire. So I don't do this technique a lot during the winter, simply because there's a lot in and out, and I don't like the cold anymore. MAP torches burn hotter than propane or butane. I've decided I really like the MAP torches, which is the yellow canister. I've got a slightly upgraded flame tip on it, which gives me a longer, more controllable tip. So that's the only upgrade. I'm not using a stock flame tip. I'm using more like a soldering tip, a heavy soldering tip. And but you can still do it with a standard tip. It's not a big deal. With MAP, yes, it burns hotter, but that means you can get the surface to the right temperature faster, which does reduce the risk of igniting the wood and ruining what you're trying to do. When I started learning, I did do this with propane. Propane works just fine. Propane is or butane. Butane is the blue bottle, right? No, propane is blue, butane is green, right? Yes. Yeah, propane is blue. Easily, you can get these at the regular hardware store. Propane works fine. It doesn't burn as hot. It burns a little cleaner. So there might be some fume issues with MAP gas. Keep that in mind. Propane burns cleaner, but it doesn't burn as hot. So you're going to spend more time with that propane trying to get your piece to the right temperature. Higher temperature, longer time, more chance of setting things on fire. Butane, I've not been super successful with. But because I use MAP most of the time, I don't worry about it. So there's your fire information. There are a lot of people out there that claim to be doing Shoshugiban technique, and when you watch them after this demo, you'll realize that they're not really. They're scorching or ebenizing the surface, sanding it away, and calling it Shoshugiban when it's not really. You must hit that certain temperature in order to caramelize the resins. And I've got a little video clip here since they won't let me set stuff on fire. So if you would please go to the video clip. I've got a little setup. It's just a metal tray with a ceramic plate. That's actually this piece. And I've got my little MAP torch, and go ahead. I'm just scorching the surface. Now what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get the surface not only glossy, but crackled. The crackle is the tell. If you get the wood hot enough, that charged surface will start to crackle like you see in your fire pit. And right now I'm just kind of scorching the whole thing, and pine burns much faster than maple. But you can see the surface of the wood start to take that crackle right there in the middle. You can see right there at the bottom now. You notice how it's breaking up, right? That's when you know you've hit that temperature and the resins have started to change. That's what you're going for, and that's when you know when to stop. So the goal here is to char that entire surface to the point of crackling, and that's when I know I've hit the right temperature. And this was all done in real time. It doesn't take a lot of time. Be mindful of if something ignites, you might want to blow it out or put it out somewhere. I would not use water. I simply smother or blow or fan or cross my fingers. And then leave it alone for a couple of minutes because it's ridiculously hot. I've researched this one thoroughly as well. But set yourself up somewhere where you're not going to damage your lawn, set the neighborhood on fire, burn down your own shop. And if you do, it's not my fault because I told you not to. All right. All right, so let's go back to the overhead. I've got a couple of pieces that I have charred. One is a little bit deeper than the other. All right, so you can see the surfaces are fairly crackled, relatively evenly. And I did this yesterday afternoon, just ducked out the side of my shop and set it on fire. Now they're about a 1/4 inch thick. I did not have any burn through. Depending on the shape of your piece, if you're doing a square platter, watch your corners. If you're doing a heart shape, watch the point of the heart. Keep that a little bit on the thicker side, or it will ignite. This one did ignite, and that's the only downside to doing a really pointy point on the bottom of your heart plate. This one, not as bad. It's a little bit thicker. There's a little more material there. And but that's the surface that we're going for. That's the overall look as far as temperature. Now, from here on in, it gets really, really dirty. So I highly recommend wearing gloves, a smock or an apron. And I've got my Real Milk Paint Company apron here, simply because this is what I normally use for char work. I work over a trash bucket at home. You can obviously just work over the phone, brushing this char off, work over the floor, and but you got to understand this stuff gets everywhere. So I highly recommend dust mask, air filters in your shop running. Wear some gloves because it's nasty. The first step of brushing back the char is not as bad as the step when we get into the power brushing. And but do your own due diligence. Protect your lungs. Protect your nose. This burned stuff is nasty. but the effect I think is worth it. And if nothing else, you probably should have all of these devices, these breathing protection devices in your shop anyway. So it shouldn't be a huge deal. All right, now I've got a series of brushes. I've got just a big wire brush. Can you go back to the overhead real quick? There you go. Just a big standard wire brush, like for barbecue pit, grill grates, things of that nature. This one is dedicated to my shop. I don't use it outside. And it's a great way to get the majority of the heavy stuff scrubbed off of the surface. And then I've got a couple of smaller sets. This was a 3-brush set from Harbor Freight. With Harbor Freight, as we all know, if it does not have an electrical cord, you're probably all right. These are really good brushes. They have held up nicely. And as far as Harbor Freight products go, I do recommend these. Other ones, not so much, but these are pretty good. I've got a wire brush, a brass wire brush, and then a nylon bristle brush, which is good for cleaning the remainder of the soot off at the end. I normally start with the big heavy brush. I'll go with that one. And I just start scrubbing. All right. So if you can go, yeah, where do you want me in relationship to the camera? Yeah, I could have moved over. All right, so it's really simple. Brush away that soot and try to do it in the same orientation as your grain line, because you will leave brush marks. You're creating more texture while you're doing that. The cool thing is it does help with the overall finished look of the piece. Now, I do not recommend sanding because you're going to get, even with filtration, good suction, you're going to get this fine dust everywhere. It's going to clog up your filters much faster. If you have any concern, do this process outside as well. It's not difficult. It is definitely messy. And if you do the majority of your work with that heavy bristle brush, the rest of the process will be relatively simple. Now, if you're using the technique of Yakasugi to treat timber, you don't need to brush off the char. That's part of the charm of that particular technique. All right, so from the big one, I then go down to the smaller wire bristle brush. There's more bristles. The bristles are shorter and it'll allow me to get rid of more of this char from the surface. Gonna have a dirty Kleenex tonight, man. Is there a question? Oops. And then I'll do the brass. Again, it's softer. I'm stepping down in the stiffness of the wire just to, it like moving your way up in the sanding grips. I'm moving my way through the bristle stiffness in order to remove as much as I can before I shift over to the powered option. All right, so that's my brushes. I could do the nylon if I want, but I normally hold that to the very end. And then what I really like to use is my little Guinevere. Say hello to my little friend. This is just a little grinding device from King Arthur. When you turn it on, I've got just a standard round wire brush. Again, it's from Harbor Freight. It's got a 1/4-inch shank, which works well with this particular handpiece. I find that the smaller versions of the wire brush held in a Dremel really don't do the job that you need. The bristles are too small, the wheel diameter is too small. It takes forever. You'll burn through a number of those discs. So early on in the technique, I just used a hand drill. It was really heavy. I find that this Guinevere simply makes it a lot easier. And again, I'm referencing the grain direction on the back of my piece because I want to use that bristle brush in the same orientation as my primary grain line. And this is where it gets really dirty because all of that stuff is flipping right back up into my face. I would normally be wearing a lot more breathing protection. I'm not going to do the whole thing. I really don't want to breathe this crap. But you can see where we're going. Go ahead and turn it off. You can see where we're going with this. I want to remove enough of the char material to expose enough light colored wood so that I can get a successful color. And by working with a powered option like this, let me just go ahead and put that back. It makes the entire thing move exponentially faster. Okay, it's a dirty, nasty process. Cover yourself up, wear protective covering, but spend the time and get the surface as clean as you can. But don't be aggressive. If you're too aggressive, even with the powered wire brush, you will start removing wood material, and that will ruin the illusion when you get towards the end. So let's go ahead and put the camera back. I think I'm done with the trash can for now. I'll keep the robe on. This is, sir. No, Charlie's asking about the brushing direction. I am brushing with the grain as much as possible. No, that's the chatoyance. When you go to the other side, grain's going this way. Yeah, yeah, go ahead and go to the overhead. All right, so we'll look at the back first. So point to the heart is there. The primary grain is running this way. Now, this particular piece of wood has a lot of chatoyance. You can see the feathering going this way. That's not the grain, that's the feathering. The grain is going this way. You're seeing the curl or the feather. So when we flip it over, you come up and look at this one and look at it from the back first. The grain is going this way. The curl is going this way. I didn't mention, but I always try to go with lower figure wood for my color work, simply because you can get that curl or that feather, which can screw up the illusion. That's what you're seeing. The grain is going side to side, not up and down on this particular piece. All right. So the one that I did for my demo, you can see the grain much more clear, right? So there's my grain lines just running across the piece. And after I scrub back that char, what is left is that darkened grain line. That's that resin that has been caramelized effectively. It will, unless you really get aggressive with your sanding or your cleaning, you're going to end up with those grain lines accentuated. You're going to create some cool texture with your wire brush that will enhance the illusion. And you have a reference point after when you apply that translucent color. Okay, so let's go ahead and set up the lathe for some color work. How's that going? That's not locked down. Okay, sweet. It depends on the piece. It
depends on the piece, whether you have the grain go this way or that way. If I were doing that for wood carving, I probably would have went the other way for strength on the tip.
Right. So the question was, do I prefer having the grain direction going one way or the other? Then the short version is, I normally don't pay enough attention to worry about it. That's the honest answer, and for me, it's probably pretty accurate. But it depends on what you want the final piece to look like. So if we could show this real quick, on my sunset, I purposely oriented the grain so that it was going east to west, not north and south, because I wanted that the grain lines helping me create that illusion of the sunset bands. Okay, so I did that purposely. This would not have been as pretty if the grain was going north to south. So this one was definitely something that I specifically chose. The red ones, I didn't pay enough attention to worry about it. So it didn't, you want the honest answer? That's the honest answer. I didn't pay enough attention to worry about it. But I did find out when I started messing with that sunset kind of look that on the hearts, if I'm not doing a solid red color, if I'm doing more like a yellow, orange, red, which I'm going to do today, it's a bit more effective color-wise with the grain going east to west as opposed to north and south. So you're in charge of that. You're in control of that, but you have to determine the grain direction for your particular project before you start mucking with it. On a round piece, no big deal. On a shaped piece, it can definitely give you an advantage if you are using that as part of your color arrangement parameters. Now, since we're working with color, and since it's me who's a mess, everybody knows it. We're going to go ahead and put some paper towel down. I've got a piece of 1/4 inch thick acrylic that fits between my Powermatic headstock and tailstock. It's long enough that it just drops into the lathe. It'll fit on my Galaxy as well. Gives me a good platform to work on. And it prevents things from falling through the gap of the lathe as well. If you don't have, if you do color work of any sort and you don't have a board that goes over your lathe, probably want to get one. Now, if you're smart, you probably also don't do a bunch of color work at the lathe. You probably have a bench or something, a nice clean flat surface. You have clean flat surfaces in your shop? No, okay. Does anybody have a clean flat surface in there? So, okay, Steve does. I've been over there. That is True. Yeah, Bill's kind of hemming and hawing a little bit. All right, so let's talk about color. There's lots of things that you can do to do lots of things color-wise. For this particular technique, I really do find that I prefer a product called Unicorn Spit. You can buy this at Michael's, Hobby Lobby. You can buy it at a lot of the art supply stores, although I think we're down to just Dick Blick now. St. Louis Art Supply. I've never been there, but they're doing a lot of advertising. Art Mart has been bought out by Dick Blick, and the Delmar Dick Blick is going to close and move into the Handley location where Art Mart was. Blah blah blah. Anyway, I wish them the best, and you should be able to get Unicorn Spit there if they ever get their inventory moved over. Anyway, you can also get it from me. I have all of my inventory here. I do not have all of the colors anymore. I'm still dealing with supply chain issue on Unicorn Spit because I'm a small fish in a very large pond, but I do have some here if you'd like to purchase some. What this is, let's start with what this is not. What Unicorn Spit is not a paint. If you try to use it like a paint, brush on, hoping for opaque color, you're not going to like it. I avoided this product for a long time because I tried to use it like a paint. It's not a paint. Don't try to use it like a paint. It won't work. You won't be happy. It's a water-based gel stain. So like other stains, it will do a little penetrating, but it's mostly intended to build upon the surface. Like actual stains, it has some translucent qualities. Because it's a water-based gel, you can thin it with water to begin with, and you can use additional water during the application product to actually remove and blend some of that coloring. So you've got a lot of control with this product simply by using water, and up to including you can effectively wash most of it off if you need to. Oh my God, that's horrible. It turned into an ugly, dirty brown. I need to clean the entire surface off, spray bottle, a little scrubbing, and there you go. No problem. I like using it because of the blending quality. That's really what I prefer. And it's translucent enough that I should still be able to see the grain lines, the highlighted grain lines on the surface of the wood underneath. Now, again, if you're working on a piece of pine, the charred grain lines are going to be a lot more intense. They're not as intense on other standard hardwoods because these woods simply don't have anywhere near the resin quantity that a pine does or a cypress does. And so we'll have to do a little modification with black right at the very end. Application is super simple. I'm just using craft brushes, no big deal. So I'm going to use one brush. I'm going to go lightest color to darkest color. I've got a micro mini brush, and I've got some Dixie cups. If you don't have a box of Dixie cups in your shop, you're not doing yourself any favors. Dixie cups are incredibly handy. Great for tiny sips of water, but they're also great for mixing paint. So we're going to work here. I don't think I'll be moving around much at this point, except for squirting. I've got a squirt bottle with some water. I do like to wet the surface of the piece first. So I just take my squirt bottle. This will wash off a little of the char. I don't want heavy pools of water sitting on the surface. If you need to, grab a paper towel if you're working on the inside of a bowl or something, maybe mopping up some of that. Because you've scorched the surface, you're not going to raise the grain. There is no grain left to raise. The fuzzies are not going to come by getting that surface wet, but it gives me a really good surface on which to work with this particular product. Now, it is because of what it is, you do need to shake the bottles. Most of these have been used recently, so I don't need to shake them too much. A little bit goes a long way, so I'm going to squirt a little yellow into my Dixie cup. Close that up, set it aside. Use my squirt bottle to thin it down. How do I know when I hit the consistency? I don't, I just kind of guess. You'll know if it's too thick. You won't care if it's too thin. And again, that's another really cool characteristic of this particular product. If you thin it down, it never becomes too thin, in my opinion. Now, I will strategically hit this with yellow because the yellow is going to blend with the other colors and we won't see much yellow at the very end. So I'm kind of building up kind of these random blops across the surface. And again, I'm working with the grain direction. So if the grain was oriented north and south, I'd be working north and south. It's oriented east and west, so I'm working east and west. It's just going to work out better for this process. Now, because I'm going lightest color to darkest color, I don't need to change brushes. And more importantly, I don't need to clean brushes in between. So being lazy, this plays very well into me being lazy, that I don't have to have other stuff to clean up at the very end. So I went from yellow. I'm going to do a little orange. It's probably too much. Same deal. I want to thin it down a fair amount. Take my yellow brush, use that to mix my orange. And I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to do it with a little bit more control. Now I need to start paying a little more attention. I'm just doing random blops, kind of working in some of the empty spots that were left from the yellow. And I will do a little overlay. I don't want to cover the yellow completely, but I know that most of the yellow is going to blend with the orange and the red as I work. Again, just very random. I'm not looking for a lot of control here. I'm looking for good, interesting color blends. And then the last primary color I'm going to do on the surface is red. A little bit goes a long way. Thin that down. Orange brush goes into the red, no big deal. All right, be a little more judicious in your application of the red because it will take over everything if you're not careful. I would definitely want to fill in any empty spots. And I kind of want to add little blops across the rest of the surface. Now you have complete control over how much or how little of each color or which colors you choose to use because I am kind of going for a fire-like sunset type look. Having a little more red at the very end is better. Now I could stop there, I could dry it, and it'll be just fine. I'm not as happy with that blending, so I'm going to go right back to my water bottle, and I'm going to spray the surface lightly, and I'm going to let some of that run off. I'm going to rotate it. I'm going to kind of go back the other direction. I might grab my paper towel and get some of the big stuff so it doesn't keep running back across the surface and pooling. Again, wearing gloves, so it's not a big deal. But here we are. We've got, you can see a little yellow, a bit of orange, some nice streaks of red. And because it's this water-based gel stuff, squirting it with just a little more water, kind of wiggling it back and forth, I've got a really nice blended surface. You don't see brush marks. You don't see streaks. And honestly, if I don't like it, I could wash all of it right back off. Okay. That's the best part of the whole process, is if I'm not happy, I can clean all of it off and start over again. And on that particular piece, this was one of the demo pieces for my virtual class at the Worldwide Symposium. And even after it was dry, I just went back and washed the whole thing off. There you go. I didn't feel like setting up another piece. So I washed off all of the mess on that one and just used it again. So if you're not happy, you don't have to learn to live with it. It works just fine. The last thing that I need to do, second to last thing that I need to do I want to go ahead and lock in this color. So I've got, what do you guys call this? A hair dryer. It's paint dry. I don't know what they're talking. I don't know what this hair stuff is. Standard hair dryer. I'm just going to use this to quickly dry the surface. Anybody have any questions up to this point? Huh? Does the hair dryer set the color? No, it does not. The hair dryer simply dries the color. Okay. And the reason why I'm using the hair dryer, I could let this sit and dry naturally. It'll just take a lot more time and I have no patience. You guys want me to get finished. Because I still want to go back with black in order to highlight some of my grain lines. I want the surface to be dry, not set. If it's still wet and I try to go back even with a really fine brush to do the black, there's a good chance that black's going to run and it's going to ruin the illusion. So I can't set it until I put a seal coat over it. I simply want to dry it so that the wet black doesn't activate the currently wet surface as well. It'll just get ugly unless that's the effect that you want. If it works to your advantage, do so. It's not going to work to my advantage here. That's why I want to dry quickly. And you also get a better sense of what the final color is when you dry it. It'll lighten up tremendously as it dries. All right, we won't go all the way. Okay, one more cup and small brushes. All right, so I've got here, I bought a pack of 100 of these teeny tiny little brushes, and they're really hard to hold when you're wearing gloves. I consider these kind of a single-use brush. It's got a little cap on it, and it has a very, where's the camera? It's got a very fine, there you go. It's got a very fine tip, very small amount of bristles. This is normally when I would put my reading glasses on. Magnification is your friend. If you need it, use it. There's no reason not to. I think we're all at an age, myself included, where it helps. Even with the new eyes, I have to wear magnification for certain steps. No, I'm good. Thank you. Famous last words, right? All right, so squirt bottle, thin down my black. I want the black to be relatively thin. I don't need much. I'm not going to be applying much. Stir it up real quick. If you're using these little bristle brushes, try really hard not to have a big drop of paint at the tip. Go ahead and just knock it off on the edge of your Dixie cup or the edge of your paint tray or whatever. The bigger the blob of paint when you apply it to the surface, the bigger the blob on the surface, and it can get a little dotted or spotty or messy if you're not mindful of some brush discipline. Now, I'm not going to paint the grain lines, but I am going to go back and I'm kind of going to highlight, all right? So with these little brushes, I like doing kind of strokey movements, and I'm just going along and highlighting what I can see hiding through. Now, I won't always connect the entire grain line because, again, we're just trying to enhance the illusion of the char. And on some woods, you don't even need to do this. On some techniques, you don't need to do this. But I like coming back in and highlighting some of this, just because it can give you a really cool finished look. Now, there have been a few pieces that I've done that were a little bit more artistic. I did a piece in early 2020. It was the follow-up to an artist residency that I had at Craft Alliance in 2019. And because of COVID, we were not able to do the residency exhibition until mid 20 or late September 2020, I guess is when it was. And because of that, I was able to put out some additional new work. And I did a piece that was called Can't See the Forest for the Fire. And it was a bowl that I had done the Shou technique. I went thin on my bowl. I actually purposely set the rim on fire because I wanted to have that burned irregular surface as part of the overall look. And the grain line was going east to west on the orientation of that one. And as I was working on coming back and highlighting some of that grain, I took it upon myself to add little forks of flame. Remember, if you drew cars back in the 70s and you did the big 50s, 60s, 70s flame look. Yeah, I did some of those. It was subtle. It was only a couple of them on the plate, but it enhanced the overall look. And if you did not know to look for those or you weren't paying attention, it didn't matter. It was just interesting highlighted grain. But if you were paying attention, it kind of drew the entire composition together. Anyway, so I would continue to work over highlighting some of this grain, and I'm rushing a little bit, but that's okay. But you can see where it gives you a lot of additional definition. And because I'm going for kind of that fire sunset, I want this to kind of look like clouds. If I'm not happy with the blend, I can hit it with water again and blend it down. The black will become a little more subdued when I put a finish on it. Even if it's a glossy finish, it will tone down when that next moisture hits the surface. So it still will not be as heavy as it is now. It'll tone down and enhance the illusion. But it's just a really fun thing to do. The key, again, is hitting the temperature of that initial burn, getting the surface of the wood hot enough to highlight those grain lines so that you can see them when you put your color on. That's kind of what we're going for. And the bigger the grain line, the more intense the color change. Bill?
Yeah, I can certainly see black being a possible highlight color, but can you use any color?
Sure, you can use whatever color you want. Yeah, on my sunset theme, I did black on top like I normally do, and I did white with a little black interspersed as well. The white caps of the waves are highlights along the grain line. It was just all to draw your eye and move your eye around the work by relying on the grain orientation. Kind of swirly areas of grain down where the water area is. So I use the white to kind of highlight that as well. You can use whatever color you want.
And for final sealing and finish, you're probably about to tell us that anyway.
Right. Tom's got a question in the back, and I'll talk about final finish in a minute.
So my question, Jeff, is can you use pumpkin wood or will that have a different effect?
Oh man. All right. So Tom's question is, can you use punky wood? I have not tried it, but in my mind, I can see a lot of fire. That might make a really cool burn effect, but I don't know if it will be. It will not be advantageous color-wise. Punky wood absorbs color differently than non-punky wood. It is what it is. And the issue with colors on punky wood is you're going to have light and dark patches, and it's going to be real random. If you can work that into a particular composition, it might give you an advantage. In general, however, I would say probably not a great idea. But when you try it, please send me a picture. Okay? Because he's gonna go home and try it. Yeah, video the fire. We can go out the side door. My wife will not allow us to play with fire inside the shop. It is what it is. Bring your punky wood. Any other regular questions before we get into the finish? No? All right, so finishing, you can use pretty much whatever you want. Let it dry. Let it dry for a day or two. Drying the surface with a hairdryer is not going to dry the wood. You want the wood to be dry. So normally I will do these, let them sit for a couple of days. I usually do a spray lacquer Depending on what else I might be doing to the piece, I might hit it with a spray sealer first and then a spray, well, okay, I don't use lacquer anymore. I normally use a spray enamel. So you can use spray lacquer. I sell the Hampshire Sheen line. You can use Deft. I used Deft for years. You can use a spray acrylic, like the Minwax spray gloss finishes. Those are acrylic, or you can use a spray enamel. My current favorite is Rust-Oleum 2X Ultra Gloss. That's a spray enamel. Buy it at almost any hardware store out there. And it gives the enamel will give you thicker coats. Spray acrylic will give you medium thick coats. Spray lacquer will give you the thinnest coat. So depending on what you want for your final finish, all of those spray products will work. Because this is a water-based material that will continue to reactivate, that's kind of why I lean towards spray finishing. I'm planning on trying this with a brush-on acrylic finish from Real Milk Paint Company that has worked very well for me on lots of different techniques, but I've not tried it here yet, and I don't know if it's going to be compatible. So biggest recommendation on finishing is if you have a question, run a test, or call Tom, and he will run a test and let me know. All right? How are we on time anyway? Wow, nailed it. All right, I've got 6 minutes. Does anybody have any questions? Anybody? Just somebody give me a question, even if you don't have a question. Tell me how your weekend's been. Somebody. Anybody? All right, back in the back.
So you always put the dye on with the lightest color as the first coat.
If you're working with a dye or a stain, lightest color to darkest color. If you're doing an opaque color like a paint, darkest color to lightest color, because the opaque colors can be painted on top of darker colors. But if you're using anything that's got any translucency, you want to always go lightest first to darkest. Just make sure you don't overpower your lightest color completely, or you'll lose the effect. Okay. All right, Steve, I have a patch for you. I remembered. And if anybody else doesn't have any questions, thank you all for coming and watching me talk about setting stuff on fire and then throwing color at it. The store is officially open as soon as Tom is done with the wrap up. So, will highlight now, you don't have that, or you don't have come up to the shop. Whoops. So, we'll see you next month. The winner will not. We have
We did have two winners, two classes, so this surprises me. But Wayne did pull off a victory with his salt cellar. And Steve, new in the novice turner, Steve is also a winner. So congratulations. If you guys would, as you get up, grab, if Tom didn't ask you to, grab your chair, put it on the rack. It'll really help us. Thank you.